This was David H. Breaux.
This man sacrificed everything and gave up a conventional existence.
He has no 401k. He has no retirement whatsoever.
To dedicate nearly 15 years asking thousands of people this simple yet profound question. What is compassion?
I believe it to be recognizing essence, that everything has an essence to itself. And the act of recognizing that leads to a compassionate act.
But why did he do it? To answer that, we first have to go back.
Way back to who this man was before his calling to compassion.
David grew up in Duarte, a gritty working suburb of Los Angeles, with 2 older siblings.
In a post he self-published to Medium, he described the neighborhood where he was from as one where, quote, gunshots, sirens, and helicopters flying overhead were the weekend norm.
It didn't make matters easier that his mother was schizophrenic and that his father was abusive. But little did David know that these trials and tribulations would serve as the foundation for his compassionate mission.
Compassion starts with listening, and that's to listen as compassionately, as non-judgmental, for another to express him or herself, or the earth to express itself in its own natural way, to be that space to receive that.
In spite of these circumstances, David still found a way to excel in other ways in his life. His grades were good enough to earn him admission into one of the nation's most prestigious schools, Stanford University.
And David was pretty quiet and a little soft-spoken and maybe shy, but once you got to know him, he had a very funny sense of humor, could laugh with people, and was great with jokes, and was very creative and very warm-hearted.
Sometimes people will tell you that if you want to see the character in a person, you take a look at how they treat the elderly. And he was always very respectful and very loving with my parents, even though they weren't, his parents. So I feel that kind of really demonstrates to me his true nature, that he cared for others, and that he wasn't selfish.
After college, David tried his hand at screenwriting. He also worked with kids as a substitute teacher and as a counselor at Stanford Sierra Camp,
a 13-week summer camp in South Lake Tahoe hosted by Stanford alums.
But rather than follow a more conventional path, David often felt a pull to a more spiritual life. And during the midst of a rough patch in his mid-30s, David decided to look inward.
In 2008, I had broken up with the person I was going out with and moved into a studio apartment in Oakland, California, and decided to explore internally, who am I and what am I to do?
This wasn't a surprise to his older sister Maria, who said that she and her brother often had many conversations about their outlooks and perspectives on spirituality.
We were kind of at the same level of spiritual curiosity around what else is out there besides the dogmatic approach that we were given growing up, and just wanting to explore and remain curious. And so it wasn't really a shock to me that he was doing that or surprising. It just kind of was a natural progression of the work that he had already started.
During that period, for about a year and a half, I read a lot of books and watched a lot of YouTube videos about saints, sages, masters, and mystics, and came across a TED Talk by a woman named Karen Armstrong.
Karen Armstrong was a Catholic nun who left the order and became a religious scholar. In 2008, she was awarded the 3rd annual TED Prize, which is a grant given to people with a bold and creative vision aimed toward addressing a pressing global challenge.
And now, here's my wish. I wish that you would help with the creation, launch, and propagation of a charter for compassion, crafted by a group of inspirational thinkers from the three Abrahamic traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Why? Because in compassion, when we feel with the other, we dethrone ourselves from the center of our world and we put another person there.
After watching that, I got a pen and a notepad and tried to just write what I thought compassion is in that first notebook, and decided to go around the community of Oakland, California at the time where I was living, and to come up with a collective definition. And in doing so, I found something very powerful happening. There was engagement around a value and virtue that I come to cherish in my heart.
But David's epiphany didn't come without resistance.
A tremendous ego rose like Godzilla out of the Pacific Ocean and said, no, this is not going to happen. You are ridiculous, you are crazy, you are a fool.
There was a portion of myself that I refer to as the ego that said, no. And the spirit said, yes, yes, yes.
Did your friends question you about your change?
At first, a lot of people encouraged me to get a life, as they say. And I recognized that it was a life to give.
When did the thought cross your mind, like, oh, he's probably going to do this for the rest of his life?
When he told me,
Wow.
I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, I said, okay. And he considered it his job. You know, it wasn't a traditional employment by any means, but he got exactly what he needed. He got people time, he got, gifts of food and tea, and people generous enough to open their home to him. So he had everything he needed and wanted.
One of those generous people was David's old friend Josh, a fellow Stanford alum who David had met at Stanford Sierra Camp. Josh was in the middle of wrapping up his PhD at UC Davis when he decided to offer his old friend a place to stay.
I remember asking him, like, what are you gonna do? Like, how are you gonna make ends meet? And like, how do you do this and make a living at it? He wasn't worried about it. He had a lot of faith in the kindness of people, and people took care of it and managed to make it work. I thought maybe it would kind of fade out and eventually he'd do something else, but he was adamant that this is what he wanted to do. He did it.
On June 3rd, 2009, David established the corner of 3rd and C in Davis as his place to literally and figuratively stand for compassion.
The experience in Davis started out with people wondering, what is this man doing standing at a corner with a pen and a notepad? There were people that came up, a couple police officers on bikes asking me for an ID. At the time, I had housing, and a lot of people thought I was a homeless person because Davis has a lot of transient people who come. People wondered until I became a familiar face because I stood there each day.
I felt like it was impressive and so unique. I've been reflecting on this so much, but so many people, I think, have these impulses to do things like that, and then so few people actually follow through with that because it's hard, right? I don't think David would say it was hard, but like giving away all your stuff, your car, your apartment, your belongings, and just standing there and seeing who's going to show up is vulnerable and hard, I think.
David asked thousands of people about their definition of compassion during his time in Davis. Those conversations even later served as source material for a book that he self-published.
How was the book received? How was your feedback?
Incredible. I printed out copies and I'd stand at the corner, and the first few months, I received a lot of positive remarks about it. I just reached the 800 distributed copies mark. So there are now 800 copies out there in the world where people are finding them and reading them.
David even left Davis for about a year to embark on a multi-city compassion tour, around the rest of the country and Canada.
I started in Keene Valley, New York, and went to Burlington, Vermont, Lodi, New Jersey, Louisville, Kentucky, and then it started to get cold, so I went to Tampa, Florida for December, and Austin, Texas, San Antonio, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Nashville, Tennessee, Carlsbad, California. And because people have found out about who I am and what I've been doing, there have been subsequent invitations to other places.
It was pretty clear that David was leaving a lasting impression on people simply by putting compassion into action, one person at a time.
It just started with an introductory conversation where he asked me what my definition of compassion is, like he does with everyone else. And eventually I just kept coming back, coming back and asking him more questions and more questions. And he would entertain them. He would take his time to spend with me to answer these really big questions that even my college philosophy professors wouldn't entertain.
The biggest lesson was he taught me how to stay still. And the way he taught that wasn't actually through anything he said, it was through his actions. Because one time me and my friend were walking by and we said hi to David, and he said, do you have 5 minutes to sit? And then we started thinking, it's like, what could we possibly be doing that's so important that we don't have 5 minutes to sit next to this very profound man? So we sat next to him in complete silence. And that was one of the first times I was able to meditate for longer than just a minute. And I could feel his energy next to me. I could feel him sitting there. And he just did it by example.
In 2013, the city of Davis formally honored David's mission by approving the construction of a compassion monument at the corner of 3rd and C.
My name is Brennan Bird. I'm the earth bench builder that helped bring this into creation. I originally met David, I think 2009 or 10, when I was attending school here, and we just became friends. And he reached out to me about building a monument to compassion. He knew I did these, we called them peace on earth benches. They're made from plastic bottle bricks stuffed full of trash. So this bench has 233 plastic bottle bricks, about 100 pounds of trash inside of it that we collected from the community. But you know, every time I came up to the Sierras over the past 10 years, I would stop by in Davis and come to the Compassion Corner Earth Bench and always see David. So I'm gonna be sad to now, you know, come and visit Davis and not see him. But you know, I very much sense his spirit and his presence here. And I think if anyone comes and sits on the bench, they can feel the peacefulness of being here.
All right, this just into our newsroom. We now know the name of the man found dead at Central Park in Davis. The Yolo County coroner has identified the homicide victim as 50-year-old David Henry Breaux. Breaux's body was found in the park Thursday morning. Davis police say he had multiple stab wounds. Investigators are asking the public for any Ring doorbell footage or surveillance video that might help with them in their investigation.
After 14 years, David's quest to define compassion came to a tragic and sudden end.
On Thursday, April 27th, 2023, David was found dead, a victim to an unthinkable crime.
The incident, now being investigated as a homicide, happened only a block from the compassion bench Breaux commissioned with the city, a word people say he lived by.
Could you walk me through the initial emotions and feelings that you had when you first got the news of David's passing?
Shock, intense sadness. Yeah, I flipped out. It was sad. It's the saddest news I've ever received in my life. And I had received the news of my mom's passing in 1997, and David actually was the one who broke that news to me, and this is exponentially worse.
But in the midst of her grief, Maria remembered a powerful message that David had sent her over Facebook 7 years prior.
David said in 2016, if I'm ever harmed and unable to speak for myself, forgive the perpetrator and help others forgive that person. And at the time, in 2016, I said, okay, I'll forgive and I'll encourage others to do the same. Because I also believe in forgiveness. Both David and I had gone through a process of forgiveness in our family of origin. And so that's just something that is one of our very strong values and principles. And so in going forward, I think the most important thing is just continuing to have forgiveness in my own heart, in my own life.
I believe that most people are experiencing some type of dormant psychological pain, which causes faults, which causes them to lash out, which causes them to be angry, resentful. And so when a situation arises in which there's conflict, that is what is being brought to the table rather by a person in pain. Compassion recognizes that, and compassion moves past that to the point where recognizing the essence of the person. The essence of the person is not their pain. The essence of the person is their unconditional love. If you reflect that to that person is likely to recognize that, and it changes the whole energy of the situation.
What has it been like for you to see the ways in which he's impacted and touched people, and how people have memories of him?
It's blown my mind. I'm learning now just the extent of the huge impact that he made on so many people, and it's just awe-inspiring and sad that I couldn't really celebrate with him. And maybe I'm being hard on myself, maybe I did, but I just wish I could have celebrated to the extent that matched the impact that he was having.
Maria got a chance firsthand to witness David's impact on others. First, when the community gathered to remember him during a vigil held 3 days just after he died. Then again 14 years to the exact day, he began standing at the corner of 3rd and C during a memorial held in his honor.
David could have chosen a lot of places in the world or even in Davis. But this crossroads is where he chose, and that's why we're here today.
My wife and I met David in 2009 on a Saturday during the farmers market. We became fast friends, and for the better part of a decade, David would periodically stay with us in our home with our family. It was wonderful to feel like we had kind of an insider view of the journey as his vision grew and materialized.
As we think about how we're going to remember David, we need to have practices, because David was always about practice.
Even though David is gone, his work is far from finished. His first book is in the process of being republished, according to his sister, and there's a possibility of creating a second book from many of his unpublished notes.
Whatever happens next, one thing is for sure. Maria plans to continue speaking on David's legacy of a life dedicated to compassion.
I have some ideas I want to bring to the table, and to the extent that I have the skills and the drive and the know-how, I want to use those skills to continue his message of compassion.
Compassion can be taught. One can be taught how to recognize the essence of themselves, first and foremost. And I think it's through a quiet place inside the heart, in which you go within to recognize who you are, first and foremost. And secondly, what am I doing with that knowledge of knowing who I am? What am I doing? And in those quiet places, when the need arises, again, to help someone, to help yourself or to help someone else, it leads to a compassionate act.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. In case you're new around here, my name is John Santiago, and I am the creator behind this YouTube channel, World of Nuance. To wrap this video up and to honor David, I would love to hear from you. Share what your definition of compassion is in the comments. I tried to cover as much ground as I could in this video, but obviously I couldn't get to everything. However, there are some great resources, some wonderful stories that were told about David throughout the national media, as well as his published work elsewhere online that you can read. I've linked to all of those in the description down below. Now, if you enjoyed this video, you can support World of Nuance by sharing it with a friend. You can also subscribe to the channel too if you haven't already, or you can watch the next recommended video right here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.